all the folks who are in the Minneapolis city, and I'm hoping that everyone is safe and well in their own homes and places.
I used the handout that Ellen had put on Facebook. I used that in my class this morning because I couldn't teach a class without discussing what went on in the city last night and has been going on since Monday. So it was a short conversation, but I added the handout with a bunch of links for books for their children and resources. So I know Ellen's not on with us today right now, but it was very helpful.
And this, Karen, this was because I think I'd seen it, but I might have glanced over, but it was a handout about talking to children about race and about the racial violence.
And all the different ages where kids start to be able to understand race, that even at 3 months, they're able to, recognize that this is the person that I have a relationship with, and this one's somebody different and they're a different color, but this is the one I have a relationship with.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting.
Good.
I will try to post, if I can add the handout onto this, I will.
Okay.
So give me a couple minutes and I'll work on that.
Great. Nikki, the link that you just posted, does that include that? It's okay. So it's an additional resource. Great. Okay. Yeah. So then, yeah, Karen, if you can find that, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Thank you.
I have to move to my other computer. But carry on.
Anyone else? Personally, I'll just say that I felt stuck in a way of knowing or feeling kind of a best response. And at least I feel like I've been very encouraged by the neighborhood response efforts for cleanup and for responding to neighbors and the restaurants and the things affected. So today at 3, there's a food drive actually for through the mental health nonprofit right there at 30th and Lake Street. And so from 3 to 6, they're doing, because that area that was the hardest hit and where the 3rd precinct is now just a food desert. Because the Cub and the Aldi, although Aldi's hasn't been in the news much, but there's a big Cub grocery store, and so that's gone. And so, and then there was another smaller grocery store, and that's gone. And so, so that's the residents immediately are needing, bread and peanut butter and canned meats and anything, that you don't have to refrigerate or cook. So, so in a way, it's, I feel like I'm happy that there's some action, and like my choir. Actually, my choir used to practice right there at the Cavalry Lutheran Church at 39th in Chicago, where the initial incident occurred. And so there we're singing tomorrow songs of peace, so some protest songs. So that's, personally, I feel a little better that I can do something while I'm also understanding the feelings and kind of keeping up with the news. So here we are today. Again, welcome to everyone. I'm recording for those who can't join us today. And last week we had a really nice small group session talking about planning, and divided by about size by district, and then we talked on Wednesday, and Nikki, you were there. See, was anybody else with us on last Wednesday? And we ended up staying in a whole group and having conversations about fall planning and just opening things up to plans A and plans B and things like that. And so let me first start with a poll. I altered my poll and from my it still is crappy to happy. But now that we're at the end of the school year, here's the poll. This is considering everything. So everything. So how are you feeling about the 2019-2020 school year, about how it went? So here's my poll. We'll see how you're doing. Again, you're feeling from happy to crappy, and you can interpret this however you want to. Personal success, challenges, whatever. Just take a little pulse here and see where you all are. And I think, okay, so so pretty much everybody's waiting. I'm gonna end this and share it. I think the fact that you are anything but higher than a 7, right? That's success. That's success. So anybody want to respond about their vote or their interpretation of the question?
Sure, I can. I felt like, considering everything that happened, I think everybody rose, and we should feel pretty good about our experience.
Yeah, I thought the same. I put a 2 because I think overall, if you look at the whole year, it's impressive that everybody, kind of went above and beyond, and hopefully I'll finish the year strong. Obviously there's lots of disappointments, but it's what we have. So I really feel like the people that I've worked with have really made the best out of it. And I feel like, at least from where I am, we've been pretty supportive or supported from our district and the people that we work with. And I guess I've been impressed with the families that have stuck with this Zoom meetings. So I've been pleased with that, I guess. So I felt pretty good about it.
Good. Thanks. Anyone else?
Karen and I were just talking before this meeting about how I was just telling her that my kind of attitude had shifted for the better of what we're able to do even if it were normal times. We would never have voluntarily taken on any of this, and yet we did it, and there are a lot of things we learned, and things we know we can do, that it's just been really nice. I had a group of TAs yesterday, and they said, this has been wonderful. We're so glad we can gather once a week, and why haven't we done this before? We don't all have to be in the same building at the same time, and in order to be together and learn from each other. So I have a different kind of attitude about what people are willing to do, and what I'm willing to do, and the learning that can happen even in tough times.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Christine.
Christy and I were talking earlier. I feel like we've gone through, and we are still there, but gone through several months of grief and sadness and letting go, and that's a part of the process of us moving on and finding out what are some of the good things that come out of this, and what are some of the structures that we will now create that's going to meet our families where they're at in a different way. And but it's like we needed to go through that fog, and it's okay to still be there. It's change is hard, but change is change, and change is inevitable. So take the time you need to do that, and then we get to go forward now. So. And it's easier said than done.
And it probably should be noted that, what choice did any of us have, right? A lot of times we choose not to do things because we don't have to we don't have to do them, right? And we're fortunate to have flexibility in a lot of ways, and then things happen and you don't have a choice. And so I've just been really impressed from everything that I've seen from the educators that I've talked with and observed. And I have to tell you that my sessions with you this past month have been so helpful to me personally, emotionally, as sitting sort of at the university and having my own sort of role, whatever I do in parent ed, to be able to connect with you around the state and hear your stories and hear your experiences and hear you support each other so well and share so easily and connect with each other is incredibly heartening. So yeah, I'm I'm kind of optimistic, that there are reasons for things and that sort of thing. Nevertheless, it's been hard, very, very hard. And so, I'm impressed with you guys and parents and students, and I can't even imagine what's like for administrators, right? So the kinds of uncertainties that they faced. Well, thanks. So what would you guys like to do today? Do you want to, when we left last time, you wanted to continue meeting to be able to, and my sense was to continue talking about the fall. So is there a particular, so one thing is, what do you want to talk about related to the fall, or not have anything and just get into groups? Do you want to stay as we've got, 12, 13 people? Do you want to stay as a full group? Do you want to divide? What do you want to do? So the time is yours. What would be most meaningful to you and helpful to you?
I would like it if we all stayed in the same group today. We've got the right amount of people, and I think that would be helpful for me. Got a couple more thumbs up on that one, so.
Yep. Others okay with that? Okay, good, okay. All right, well, that's one question down. So should we just, I have to say on Wednesday, and Nikki was there and Anjali was there, we didn't have a particular set of topics. We just sort of opened it up. People asked questions, bounced it off of each other. Or is there a particular thing you'd like to talk about? Starting new relationships with parents, how you're going to tackle that. Plans A, plans B. I know one of the things we talked about on Wednesday was sort of outdoor education and for young children, and some of the schools that have been thinking alternatively, if kids can't be in the classroom, that they'll still have that opportunity for kids to get together. So what would you like to do? Just open it up?
I would be interested in some outdoor ideas if anybody has done any of that.
Okay. Okay, well, let's start with that. Outdoor education thoughts, and maybe think too about the fall, right? And about what that might, is that okay, Carrie, to sort of be thinking about the fall?
Yeah, because I know somebody brought it up last week, and I know that's something my supervisor and I were talking about today during our talk, and just how that would look.
So I can speak to what we did this last year. I taught a class in the fall called Wide Open Spaces. Okay. And we did kind of a hybrid class where we would go on field trips to, we went to a nature park, we went to Apple Orchard, we went to Wood Lake Nature Center. So kind of every 2 to 3 weeks we would go somewhere, we would just meet somewhere. And the other times we would be in the classroom as a regular, like a typical ECFE, where we do parent-child time, and then we would separate and kind of do the typical class. And that was really great. And I know that we have talked a little bit about that for this fall, and maybe not doing the classroom portion of it, and maybe trying to do more places to go visit, just do outdoor stuff. But obviously some of that is weather dependent, and but it was great. So I guess that's what we did last year, and I know that there's been some talk of that for this upcoming fall as well.
One thing I wanted to bring in from the last meeting is that one of the teachers talked about where they would do a hybrid in which potentially do a hybrid in which they would have like families rotate in. So let's say it was a class of 10 parents and children, 10 families. 3 or 4 would come into the classroom and the rest would remain at home, and that the teacher would actually conduct a classroom such that, you know, she was in the classroom with the 3 or 4 families that were in the classroom, and everybody else would be on the Zoom or on the online video conferencing. So actually truly hybrid class, online offline at once, right there. So, and then that would give the intent there was to give the children, especially, as well as the parents, an opportunity to actually meet and socialize with each other with appropriate social distancing precautions, and, you know, give a small batch of the set of families to come in and have that experience, while otherwise they can continue to stay online and participate. So I thought that that was an interesting idea too, to actually combine the two.
And I believe it was Trina Olson, maybe from,
Okay.
was that Nikki or Anjali?
I
Do you
don't
remember? I'll have to look it up, but I think it was Trina Olson, because people were also raving about their setup. And I think she's in, was Zeta?
Yeah, I think, or Prior Lake. I don't know why.
Prior Lake, that's it.
Prior
She's in
okay.
Prior Lake. Yeah, Trina Olson.
I have a question that maybe, I don't know. I feel like reading like some of the guidelines that have come out, I feel like each person interprets them differently. And sometimes I feel like, is it like when I read them, to me, it doesn't feel feasible given spaces that we have in our district, that I just don't, but maybe I'm interpreting it too word by word, and it's, I don't know. I feel like reading the guidelines doesn't feel like even 3 families would fit in our classroom with all the things that we'd have to be taking care of at the same time. And I don't know, it doesn't feel like it'd be relaxing or safe and comforting. And I don't know, I feel like we just all need to read them and kind of go through them and figure out, what does it really mean?
So Julia, just for my own clarification, and also because you've mentioned like 3 families, is this based like on a percentage that has been recommended?
Well, just when I think about the 6 feet, and I think about 2-year-olds, and then I think about a parent room, and I think about the table and I was telling someone last night at a meeting, I said, you know, if they tell me that, okay, that's great, it works, go for it, I would do it. But I don't know if our parents will feel safe. Like, is it really safe? I don't know. It feels like there's too much maybe gray area still in some of the guidelines that I don't know.
Julia, when I hear you talking, I feel a lot of the same things, and I feel like we walk through them differently based upon our levels of understanding or fear or whatever that might be, administration or teachers. And I guess I would love to hear what people, if somebody has some good thoughts about how do we go forward when something like this is happening. Maybe I'm not looking for the answer of how to interpret exactly what they're telling us, but how do I walk it through graciously, but empowered with the people around me? And so we're all I think there's some angst. That's what I'm feeling right now, angst about that. And like, if anybody has good ideas, great ideas of where to go to, or how they've walked through it maybe already in some ways, that would be really helpful. I don't know, is that Would that be helpful, Julia? I don't want to
Yeah.
usurp your question.
Right, because
I'm not gonna, yeah, because
Mhm.
what's out there for the guidelines is we could all come up with a variety of ways to do that. What I would love to know is how are people working it out together in
Right.
their staff, with administrators or whoever.
I also have a question if we're going to talk about like what are the guidelines. I think over the process I have become more and more and more confused about the goal. Because when we started all of this, I think that I thought that the goal was not that 100% of us were going to avoid getting COVID-19. I thought that we were working together to flatten a curve, that we were working together to allow for time for our healthcare system and for our state to be able to handle the care that we may need. And now I think we got to that time that the state said, okay, we're going to loosen some guidelines because we're ready to provide care in a more substantial way. But I think the message perhaps has changed. The goal is, I think, and I'd love to hear what we're thinking families are thinking. What are you thinking that you're hearing, or what are you hearing? Is the goal now to simply avoid 100% of everybody getting COVID-19? I don't know when we're talking about, I mean, all of the precautions that we have to take, I think are really, really important. But I think I've lost sight now of the goal, and maybe it has changed.
I don't know about the goal. My thought was, I was wondering if anybody had thought about surveying their families about what they would feel comfortable with. Because I think that's our big thought is if we plan, we want our parents to feel comfortable. We want our families to feel comfortable. And so that was another thought that we had. What is their comfort level?
I know I didn't see, I don't think I think I did see our advisory council had met maybe a month or so back. And I think that's kind of where the outdoor piece kind of came from, is where they, I think, would feel comfortable if we were offering outdoor things to start with, and being outside a little bit more and that kind of thing. So that's, I think we kind of have our plan A thing, but I think, plan B is we are thinking we may be, bringing our classroom outside more. We do have a couple of field trip away events planned for September. So that was kind of, I think, what came out of just from our group of our parent advisory, but we didn't do a survey per se, but I know that was one thing that came up, was the outdoors thing. But I agree with you, Nikki. I don't know what the goal is anymore either, because like you said, I originally thought it was all about flattening the curve and making sure the healthcare was there, and now it's, you almost feel like it's a fear thing, like now I sometimes even just feel fearful going to the grocery store, but yet you always keep hearing that, 100% of us are going to get it. So, it's like, you just don't quite know either anymore what the goal is or what the end point is. But
do you think that the goal kind of varies depending on who you ask? I mean, because I just, I appreciate the big question, because so much of it seems like the responses that I hear are answering a goal of program provision, right? Or trying to stop losing money, or staying present, sort of that we'll figure out the health and safety later, but we and maybe I'm thinking myopically about like the university and their conversation about classes and students and how we're going to do all of that. And so it has been it's interesting because there's the whole Simon Sinek thing about start with the why, right? And so usually there's more the focus on the how and the what. And so that kind of it seems, at least in my world, where most of the responses are, is in like, how are we going to do this? And what are we going to do? And not that question about the why. And any of the pushback that I've heard from both parent educators as well as some faculty has been, and frankly, you know, for me, you know, it's just like they can open the classes to the classroom. I don't know how comfortable I'm going to feel walking back in with, you know, 45, 20-year-olds that have been on the beach. So, you know, I think the goal question is a really good one. And I'm sort of thinking about that old thing of the blind person and the elephant, like depending on where they feel on the thing, like it's a different answer. So I think that the goal, I mean, and should this question be answered in this group with this group, more related to what do parenting educators kind of want a focus to be in the planning? Like, is there an interest in having a value around planning around health and safety versus necessarily just provision of services, right? I don't know, but I guess I just see that the answer of a goal might vary.
Well, and I can say one more thing, and that is yesterday in a staff meeting that our district had, I just kind of came forward and said, I wonder if providing a buffet of options, if we could just come up with a whole array, because I think that people's goals are different. And so if we can do the outdoor learning, that may appeal to some. And if we can do on-site, if it's allowed, that may appeal to some. And if we can do the online, it may appeal to some. But to Susan's comment, perhaps we have all of these different goals. And I think that as we come back to fall, whether we're allowed to be on site or not, we're still going to have these varying goals.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I guess I don't really understand how the goal of flattening the curve directly relates. I'm hearing what you're saying, and to me that's not in my control, and so I haven't wrestled with that as much. And it's good to bring that up and to think about that, because what we do matters. It meets a goal. But I'm working really hard on what can we control and what can't we. And as I was thinking about this meeting, my wondering was, you know, Susan, your survey, that one of the questions was, you know, what do you need to do the things you want, or something like that. And I just am feeling this void of direction.
Yes.
For our entire profession and all of our programming. It's not filtering to me somehow, I'm not sure, but we're not hearing anything from the Department of Ed, really. Some of our programs are closing down. Our district is, as Shelley said, very supportive, and yet I heard in a meeting this week that they're not going to make any decisions until July 31st. And you know, our group needs to market what we do and reach out to the families and figure out what are I just keep thinking, what are the commonalities? Like Shelley and Julia are in a neighboring district to us. And, you know, as we think about that, like what might be the common pieces that all of our programs can take on as guiding principles, or what guiding principles do we keep from our ECFE mission, that we make sure we put anything we do through that kind of lens, or I don't know, kind of testing box of, okay, does this still match the mission of ECFE? It might be fun and it might be, but does it match the mission? And I you can sense my frustration. It feels like, okay, we're a bunch of parent educators, and I think we, for decades, we've been making things happen in this program with very little resources from the state. And so I sure would like to hear from someone in leadership who says, oh yeah, school readiness, ECFE, we know you're there. We know you're working hard, and we have some people assigned who will help you. Like, I just am feeling that there's a big void there. End of soapbox.
I agree, but that's also that was present before the pandemic and present before the riots and present, it's been present for a long time. And I would love to see that back. We need that back. We're going to lose pieces if we don't. I think having that framework of, okay, this is our filter would make a huge difference. It's like, okay, let's run it past this. Now we can go, or we have to put that one on hold for a bit. Let's revise that. So, yes.
I'm curious, based on what Christy brought up, what people would call like their top 3 things that we should be focused on with families. Like, there's something about like parent-child interaction, how to support that. There's something about helping with child development, and offering resources, other people would say. And connection, family connection with other families. I'm not alone parenting a 2-year-old, I think is huge. So yeah,
Do you want to, do you want to whiteboard this and do it that way? Or do you want to just throw your ideas over in chat? Or I think personally, Karen, I think it's a fabulous thing. I mean, we could sort of get out where the shared values are. What is it about ECFE, that to be preserved? Because I will tell you, I was going to say, Karen, when there are long-lasting challenges, then when there is a crisis, it exposes those challenges, right? And so when I moved to Washington, D.C. in 1995, and in 1996 of January that year, they had a historic snowstorm. And coming from the Midwest, you realize, like, we do snow really well. And then, but in D.C., the snowstorm hit, and I think like within a day and a half, they got some like 36 inches, which even for here would be a lot, right? 3 working snowplows. So entire Washington, D.C. area. So just that analogy that, like you can go along as long as you don't really need to stress the system and the system moves along, but then you hit a crisis and those cracks are exposed. And if a challenge has been sort of a maybe lack of a central voice or whatever, that's fine as long as districts are strong or they kind of move along. And there is a lot of love for ECFE in the state, but then crisis hits and, this all falls on your shoulders. So I totally understand. And the other thing I'll just add to that is the other thing that I've seen, though, has been kind of a knee-jerk response to things that end up feeling like Band-Aid approaches, or easy approaches, or the low-hanging fruit approach. And they still don't change the crack in the system, but they also are not necessarily in keeping with the overall mission and values of the program, right? They can look good to some people, but they don't really reach, which is why, again, I think that this identification about the core values, that those of you on the front lines who pour your lives and your souls and your careers into this and are so supportive of families, of course you don't want to see those things lost. But at least I know I'm not in a position oftentimes, as not being an administrator and certainly not having any control over budgets, to be in a position that I get to choose where those resources go, you know. So all right, I'm off of my soapbox now too. So what are some of your shared values about what you do that you would hate to see lost?
I go back to like even our core curriculum framework where we, you know, we're addressing parent development, parent-child relationships, child development, family development, and culture and community. I think those are critical. And having that as that framework, okay, now I have to work with families who have experienced trauma because of this. So I need some extra work on trauma support as a parent to add, and how do I do that? And who do I need to connect to? And who are the social workers in the schools? And that goes into the detail of it. But the bigger picture comes out of our core curriculum framework. I think it comes out of our you know, our ECFE bill. I mean, you know, it's and school readiness. It comes out of the legislature. So it's right there. But I think it needs to come to a collective agreement rather than that's an idea.
Someone last time, I think it was Shannon, brought up the idea of advocacy and unions, existing institutions that might help you that might be conducive to coming to a collective agreement and making that sort of voice, that stronger combined voice heard. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you guys think about, and how would any of you or all of you together even mobilize on that? What would a coalition look like?
I was going to say, I think about Education Minnesota. I think about Menafee. I think about the very, very, very limited capacity of one person, you know, having a one Mike Brown in the MDE.
And only
right, a part-time one person, right? A half person.
A half of my
and then having a lobbyist, or having Menafee being I guess, how would you say that the lobbying is also on behalf of community ed, or, you know, that sometimes maybe there would be a conflict of interest. And so I have a lot of interest in figuring out, I've been inspired by being able to join everyone across the state during these meetings. I have continued to get on Wednesdays and Fridays as I can, because I think this conversation right here, I think we can make something happen. And I think what Anjali is saying is critical. I think we sit at a crossroads here, and we need to figure out together, how do we mobilize? I don't have the answer, but that's, how do we bring this all together? I think is really something we need to figure out.
And what do we want from that mobilization? What's our goal?
I know up here we have technology issues for families, and so a goal in terms of, like, if I'm going to do something online, not everybody can do online. Mm-hmm. And so one is to how do we support families? And so that thing, to try to get the things to families that we can actually then support and help them. Mm-hmm. But I do think, like, the 4 areas that were identified could be potentially fit into many of the models that people have talked about. And so whether it's outdoor or the hybrid model, I think there's lots of great options.
Mhm.
So would one of the things, so as an outsider, and I say that meaning that I moved to Minnesota and knew about ECFE, but really didn't know about ECFE, right? So, and as I've come to know it and come to love it and become an advocate for it, like a really like stupidly, slobberingly crazy advocate for it around the world, I know what ECFE offers that other traditional parenting ed programs doesn't offer, right? And I'll be honest with you. And so what I have heard from you, I mean, I think one thing is, if you think about at the very beginning of today, we talked about how challenging, like you didn't ask for any of this, but you met the challenge and you've continued to do it. And I think one way of sort of it's sort of like if my house is on fire, what's the first thing that I grab, kind of thing. And so if you think about when all of this has hit you, what have you continued to do? Like, what have you continued to make sure that still gets done? And that's not necessarily a practical thing. Like, well, I've continued to teach my classes. There are characteristics of you as educators that are qualitatively different from other people who are educators, right? And I might encourage you to think about those things in terms of when the fire started in your house, what did you grab and what still remains at the end of the spring, right? What is it that you can, because I think that might help you also see beyond the domains of the core curriculum framework and indicators. And I love it and I use it and all of that. I mean, I teach it, but, and I especially appreciate in Minnesota how much of a focus we have on parent development. And I'll just put my cards out on the table that I would absolutely hate if something happened and the parent development component of ECFE went away. And it turned into more traditional parenting ed, or it turned into more of a child-focused program, right? So anyway, so again, I would just encourage you to reflect on what you've kept with you and what still survives now at the end of your school year that you individually made sure survived and thrived, that the families are better off because you paid attention to it. I do think that might help you get out of, and this isn't criticism, I mean, but for you to think sort of about priorities.
Well, to me, it all comes down to relationships. It's always about relationships. That is the number one piece. And so as families do drive-through parades or coming to pick up things, and we see these kids in their car seat in the back of the car, and they're in tears because they get to see their teacher. And they don't know how to respond, or their teachers are all clapping when they come close, and then it's overwhelming, and it's still about relationships. And you see the look in the parents' eyes saying, "Thank you for being there this whole year. You watched me through this whole year." It's huge, and that's kind of a bottom line to me. Mm-hmm. And all the other stuff is stuff, and it's good to have structure and framework, but that's that bottom line piece, is that how does this affect our relationships with people?
I have to share, Karen, just piggybacking off of that, on I do a Wednesday night class, and we decided to do a drive-by, like we were going to make them all these activity bags for summer. And so everybody came at 5:45 to our parking lot, and we decided that everybody backed in their SUVs, popped their hoods or the back of their cars, and everybody sat in like a big circle in their cars, and like our children's teacher led a circle time from their vehicles, and it was just exactly relationships. Like they loved to see each other, and that's exactly what it was. It was like face to face, that interaction, that physical being there. Yeah, it was. And we were just going to have them drive by and stuff, but one of the parents is like, "Can we just like hang out together for a while. And we're like, you know, I don't know what's right or wrong, but we all stayed safe and stayed in the cars and all that stuff. And the children's teacher just led a great group time, and it just kept going and going. So it was really fun. And that's exactly what it was, that face-to-face interaction. And I think that's just the core of ECFE, you know, is that family relationship, you know, that we get to have with their families, that we hopefully enhance within their family. And yeah, I think it's hard to do on the computer.
I think, well, I'm thinking a couple of things. One is, Susan, I think what you were talking about as well is the things that we've just mentioned, the relationships and so on, but there's some skills. Susan started this by saying we are different than others in education. We have a different training, we have a different skill set. It's difficult, I think, sometimes for us to pinpoint exactly what those are. And I think that's what I took that Susan was getting at as well. What is it that we have that's so different? And when I hear like the thought about maybe parent ed maybe we just have early childhood and no parent ed and no ECFE, it concerns me, and it makes me extremely disappointed, because I am connected with NPEN and all around our nation. We are known for quality parent education, and in such a positive way, that to just then our own state go, well, you know, let's just do the early childhood, is very disappointing. So I guess thinking about, yes, what we do, but also what are the skills that we have that it's important to build these relationships. So sorry, a little long. I'll get off my whatever.
I think just to sort of follow up on that, with parent education, we are talking about the fact that we are concerned about child development, but we consider the importance of the role of the parent. So I think, grabbing onto the fact that, as Susan said earlier too, the difference is parents, and the fact that we focus on the parents because we know that parents are the conduits to children. What is happening in a child's life is, I know you guys know the percentages probably much, you do know the percentages much better. What is happening in a child's life and how much influence there is of the parent. If you do not educate or support the parent, then child development is naturally impacted. And so therefore the value that you hold with parent education is the differential. That's what is different. And so what are your skills as parent educators make you different from other educators?
Well, it sounds like it's more than just parent education and parent development. It's parent advocacy. Sure. And that's a part of what we do is we help parents become advocates for their kids. We kind of give them this is how the school works, this is how you do it, or whatever their concern is. And then they decide how they want to manage that. Mm-hmm. But we teach that advocacy as a part of that.
I guess I'm thinking of the online format doesn't really lend that parent-child relationship interaction. And I think that's the beauty of our program, is where we have that ability to have both parent and child there and help them hone in on their ability to notice and observe their children and bring that into the discussion. And what I don't want to see with this, if we continue, is to lose sight of this, that we really need to look at this as a temporary model and not, I mean, anyone can go in and chat and do parent education with anyone. I find this doesn't lend to this online is so hard, because it's like, okay, we'll do the parent-child time and then we'll separate, and then the parents come back and talk and they're shushing their children, and so how can that change is what I'm really grappling with. Like, how can I maybe if this is going to continue, put out, you know, in these instances, observe your child here, 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 and then come back. And now we talk about what we're going to talk about, because we don't have those organic moments happening in a classroom setting. So that's what to me, the parent-child relationship is what we do best. I mean, it's we help parents notice, and we help parents observe, and we help parents think outside of the box. Like, what is this behavior? I see this behavior, but what's this need going on behind it? Instead of, you know, that's where I'm having difficulty with this online we're separating these things, or we're offering things that will bring them in. So let's do this fun activity or this one-time parent topic, you know, to keep parents present and with us. Mm-hmm. However, how can we keep doing what we do like this? And so that's what I'm trying to think of. I'm trying to think of how can I do that better? Instead of, I'm going to entertain you at circle time, so your child will stay at the circle, and then yet here I'm talking, and then we have to keep stopping because the children are interrupting, and that's not what we do, you know, best when we're in the classroom. But how can we do that best here? And so I do want to, and I love this about you, Michelle. Michelle's in my district. She's always saying that this is temporary. We need to remember that, you know, this isn't going to be our new model, you know. And so then how do we keep offering that? I mean, because I hear just different things from our administration. We weren't allowed to do a parade. We wanted to do a parade, but we weren't allowed by legal to do a parade because of liability for whatever reasons. And so, so again, I mean, I think that relationship, that opportunity that we have in our program, I think that just needs to be screamed out loud, because it's like, how do we advocate for that? That is so important. You know, you don't want to be undercover doing drive-by parades, so that, you know, but I just feel like, boy, that would have been so helpful, and with relationship building and closure for families, just to see faces. And so, you know, so it's not even just, you know, it is, we're back to helping people know what we do best. And if we can't get the administration there, you know, how do we still just bring it into what we're doing?
Very well said.
Exactly.
I have so many thoughts, but I'm trying to keep this succinct, in that one of the things that I have observed with, and again, keep in mind, I'm a technology researcher, advocate, designer, and all of that, but my mind on technology has always been as a tool, right? As a tool to help us do things, and sometimes to help us do things better, but not as a be all and end all. And so my slight fear is, what I have seen administrators do is not truly understand a program, or they don't understand. I'll give you a good example. They see dollar signs, and their job is to keep programs flowing, right? And that's a hard job. So we give them credit for doing that hard job. And so, for instance, at the university, I can have a class of 30 students in the classroom and do a fabulous job, I think, with those 30 students, and do a really good job, right? And the students learn, they love it. And then they come to me and they go, wow, your students of 30 is really doing well. Can you do that online to 300, right? Mm-hmm. Now they love that idea, because that's more money for them, right? And what they see is this service delivery. They see an instructor with content who is delivering that content to learners through a particular form of pedagogy. And the difference to them is simply the context of online versus a classroom. Now, of course, me as the instructor thinks that is an absolutely ludicrous idea, because what I do and the quality of what I do and the impact on my learners is so remarkably different in the classroom versus what I can do online. That said, I can use an online platform to augment what I do, to give them resources and that sort of thing, but I would not see it as being an exchange. And so, but that takes education to administrators who, again, are looking at the bottom line. And so I give that example because selling ECFE and selling what you do in terms of the relationships between parents and children and the relationship between parents. I mean, because one thing too, I will give all of you complete props for, that you are magicians, is the ability for you to create a space for parents to come together that is trusting, that is safe, and for them to learn from each other and to problem solve together and leave that space more knowledgeable, more confident, and with a lot of resources, a lot of feeling of support, right? That's what a lot of parenting ed programs do not do. And you are all so skillful at creating that space. It is scary how good you are at that. And so my slight concern is with the introduction of the online stuff is if people don't get what you do and they don't get the value of the relationship building and the relationship maintaining, about things like helping parents observe their children interacting with their children, sort of the heart of what education is in ECFE, is that to maintain the program, it could be easily replaced by thinking, well, you did it in the spring, you held these Zoom sessions in the spring, right? And maybe our trick is to simply figure out how to keep the numbers up. Like Christy in Minneapolis on Wednesday was saying that in Minneapolis, their registrations for the spring or for the fall are at 30% of what they were last year, right? So it's a very real administrative challenge to keep programs going. And so again, I'm in defense of administrators who have a really hard job, because unless they do their job, we could all go away, right? And so, but on the other hand, I would hate, and I have research that I've done on technology with parents, staff, and administrators within the same program to look at how their perspectives are. And I was a little disenchanted with the administrators who didn't seem to really get it, and their whole focus was on budget. Right. And so this is probably just adding insult to injury, but it's my own observation, you know, that I too believe that for you to focus together on what it is that you care about and what you do really, really well, to be advocates for yourself, while you're also acknowledging I may have to continue this way, and I may have to continue to figure out how to build these relationships with families through Zoom. I mean, that's the other wonderful thing about you, is that you're not giving up. Like, you're going, well, this is what I would prefer, but if I have to do this, I'm going to you know, Cindy's like, I'm going to figure out how to do this. And so along the way, though, I would encourage you to really hold on to those values and advocate for them, so that when that administrator wants something to continue, when those options present themselves, right, when you can get back to the classroom, and you too have an administrator that goes, well, you could have 12 parents in a classroom, but you could have 120 through Zoom, you know, is that you're able to rally together as you're doing now to really advocate for the quality and the heart, you know, of what you do.
I think we've already proved we can't have 120 through Zoom, because we too have about a third, maybe slightly over a third of the families served. So, you know, we have the data that people are not flocking to this model. And yes, there are extenuating circumstances, but anybody who's experienced ECFE in total is not going to flock to a Zoom with 120 people and say, wow, that was amazing. You know, it's just, we already have some data, so I think we could use it.
Thank you, Christy, for saying that too, because my thought is that, so right now we have all these parents that have experienced this in the classroom. They get it. They see what it's like. They can do this for now because it's for now and whatever, but they out and out say this isn't the most ideal. They've stated that. But if we have to continue this, then the next group of parents that have only experienced online learning such as this, they will have no comparison to what it was like within the classroom. So they may say, yeah, oh yeah, this is, I getting information and yeah, it's great and it's working out okay. Or maybe they wouldn't, but they've never been in the class. I mean, they've never had any other experience. So that's where I get a little worried and concerned.
And a part of that, Michelle, is there's some opportunity hidden in there that we might find families that wouldn't naturally come to the school for whatever reason. They want to be at home. They're okay with technology. So this has the opportunity to open the doors to some populations. Let's just say it that way. A population, personality type, whatever, that does like this, and it could grow ECFE. But the risk, if that's what all that we've become to be known as, and I'm totally in agreement with you, we could lose the identification of what we are today, you know, of those families you spoke of, why they come and why they're handling it for the moment.
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
I agree with everything you said. Yep, that's true. It does work for some, but we can't have 150 like Susan, you know.
Yes.
I think that's Susan just being like dramatic to sort of drive the point, I think. But I think that what Susan said earlier about you need to give the administrators and I mean, families do need to come in order for ECFE to continue. And so if it does turn out that it cannot be back to our normal, which was before COVID, then how can we think through the values, these core values, and you guys have come up with really good ones. How can that be manifested in this new setting, and how can there actually, the call is even harder. Not only do you need to figure out how to start to impart some of those values in the new way of doing things, hybrid, etc., but make it exciting so the families do want to come in. So it's not only that you have to figure out how to do this, you've also got to figure out how you're going to do it so the families are attracted and want to come in and want to see that, yep, there's going to be something that I want to go to. I need my child to go to this nature class or whatever, because otherwise I'm going to pull all my hair out because I'm here by myself with my child. And I know that, Shelley or Karen or Greta are waiting and I want to go there. So you need to be able to create something that in this mechanism that they will want to come back to.
And especially when you consider if they can find community in their closest friends.
Yes.
And not risk putting themselves and their children in an environment with strangers and people who might be ill or whatever that looks like, whatever the fear is there. Because I think as soon as the social distancing is kind of dialing, right, they're going to go back to their places of worship. They're going to be meeting with friends and family in small groups that are socially or that are safe and when we're still not safe. And so what will they find what they need there, which is totally fine. But it makes our job harder. Like, why come here to this thing when you feel like you're finding your needs there, right? I don't know. It's imperative what you're saying, I think. that we have to figure this out.
Yeah, that's actually a very important consideration.
So
That-
Greta, you're making me think of something. I heard a story in our district, some veteran, and there's people here from my district, but some veteran parents who had been taking ECFE a long time decided, they would drop their registrations for spring and just meet together on Zoom and send messages on WhatsApp. And, we can do this. We know ECFE, we can do this. And recently told our administrator that they had big regrets about not signing up, and didn't understand why it didn't feel the same, and it just wasn't as successful as they thought it would be. And I'm just like going like this, like secretly, right? Like because I do think we have this ingredient that people can't put their finger on, and they think we make it look so easy sometimes, even though we're putting in tons of effort. But I just thought that was just a little bit telling about, those particular skills that we're all talking about bringing out and highlighting and talking about and illuminating.
I like to think of it as like that special sauce, right? Because there are parenting materials out online. You can go out and you can Google temper tantrums, and there are some really good people out there putting out really good stuff. It's sometimes where I go, for another idea of how to present it, right? So what's our special sauce here with ECFE? And it's partially because we have people who are trained and maybe even, can you say gifted, or, or seasoned, or I don't, what makes us us, and what is that special thing, and what's the program special thing? I mean, the whole package. Mm-hmm.
When I was doing research on, so actually a lot of this have been the research questions that have driven my interest with not as much, well, in part developing Parentopia, but really more researching it, because having the virtual environment, again, always thinking of it as being a complement to face-to-face, and yet thinking about the snow days when parents can't come in, or when the parents have the triplets and they can't come in, or when one parent works, second shift or third shift and they want to be part of the whole thing, or about bringing in, grandma. And when I interviewed parents about why ECFE was wonderful and, how it could be better, and the number one thing they said is that, they wanted to stay connected, right? And so that is that secret sauce of connection. And it wasn't just they parent to parent, but also the educators and the staff, right? And so, but in looking at what sort of the online world offers them, what we discovered was to try to replicate as much of the feel of coming to ECFE, because Zoom is a platform, Google Meets is a platform, right? A web page is a platform, Facebook is a platform. I mean, these are all just places to either gather information, to exchange information, to do communication, to have some sort of a utility, right? GPS or whatever. And so, but it's how you design and how you execute that environment that can speak to the qualities that you're trying to convey. And so some of the things that we heard when we really took a hard listen when parents described ECFE were things like community, right? And so in doing that, then you want to have a virtual presence that creates community, which is why the default has been Zoom. Because frankly, look at what you can do with this. I mean, years ago in parent ed, for those of you that maybe were with us, 8 years ago, but it was all text-based, and we couldn't do this kind of thing. But was that idea of not just having everybody together at the same time, but also if you think about what you can get out of Zoom right now, we can see each other. We can hear each other, right? I can see Nikki in her home and I can feel like I'm connected to her. I'm not seeing an avatar of her picture. And so there's also this sort of interactivity and this real life person that I feel like I'm connecting to, that in a way I connect with them when I'm in a classroom with them, right? It's not the same. And there's boatloads of research now about how it's not the same, but it's not bad, right? It sort of is that proxy. But some other things just in terms of ECFE as an identity, you know, and that, you know, that, so who is the membership? There's really interesting research on community of practice and why people, what makes membership in a community of practice versus membership in other communities of practice. And I have a paper on this if you'd like to read it. But some of those things are identity, some of them are membership, and it's conferring that membership of location, right? So you all represent, well, most of you represent different school districts. And so your individual ECFE program for Inver Grove, right, is different than the one in Robbinsdale. And so that's an identity difference that parents will appreciate, that you being the staff members help to connect parents to those programs, right? And so I'm just throwing it out there that as you're in this middle ground, you know, of valuing what ECFE is and does, and hoping and wanting this to be a short-term solution, and yet stepping up to go, what the values of ECFE are, if I'm embracing technology, how am I going to do that, right? Is, you know, I'm just saying, like, in the sort of technology design world, the things that you care about, you can design for those things. You can design for community. You can design for support. One of the really important things is instructor presence. You can design a Zoom session, and I think, Christy, this gets to your point, right? I worked for a little bit with a colleague in Australia. In Australia, they're sort of ECFE or playgroups, and they're like ECFE but without parenting educators, right? And so there's also that consistency that educators can bring to that sense of group cohesion, and so anyway, so there are just these elements to to what makes your community, what makes the relationships that you build, the relationships, and if there's any way I can be assistance to you, you know, to then think how do you deploy technology in a way through the amount of time that you're on, how often you respond to people, how you respond to people, the format that you use, you know. So some of that work has been done, but unfortunately there's no, and this is what we said from the very beginning, there's no one way, right? You all are figuring it out.
So even kind of thinking about just kind of getting to the nitty-gritty. Okay, if this was to be the medium, at least for, let's say, the beginning, how would you do it? There are actually the other classes also discussed, and we discussed, I think, last time, ideas of how would you do it, right? So starting with that set, and to Susan's point, each and every district is different. Each and every of your situations are different. You know your family is the best. Taking from that collection of ideas that'll help you bridge, hopefully, like I'm sorry, Cindy, I think said this being hopefully a temporary time frame, but you do have to bridge it. So what can you do now with whatever technology and ideas we have, bring together our minds and then adapt it to your individual situations, and use that sort of as your toolbox. Okay, this is how I'm going to do it for now. For now, I'm going to think through this, and I'm going to figure out this is how I'm going to do it. And then you're going to market, right? Christy, you said you have to market. So I think you just say, okay, having gone through all that spring experience, I kind of figured out what worked and what didn't work in my, any particular situation. Let me take this toolbox, see what didn't work, pull out what did seem to work, and expand on it. And Cindy, like, for example, you said, with this thing, how can I focus in on this idea, on this core of being able to build this, being able to model for my parent? Like having the ECE, the early childhood educator, model for the parent about behaviors and be able to do it in a Zoom session. So I think for now, assuming that that's how it's going to be, that technology will have to augment what you are doing, it might be time to just think, say, this is how we're going to move forward. And then, you will adapt. And hopefully it will get more and more to the normal we used to know.
So I'm going to just jump in here. Thank you, Anjali. So one is, speaking of moving forward, I realize that we're way past 2. We've continued on, but nobody has complained. So how about if we'll just keep going till 2:30. And just to share with you, this is, for those of you that are interested, there are a couple of chat questions about design and all of that. You can see how much I use this because I've got them all sticky noted. So the guru of, and I really like this too, because maybe I'll do a little video just on digital habitats and walk you through it. The guru of, so community of practice is a buzz term primarily used, well, it started in the business community, and then it's so when you do your PLCs, right, your professional learning communities, some of them have been spawned from the community of practice literature by Etienne Wenger. And so he joined with 2 other colleagues, Nancy White and John Smith, and created this book called Digital Habitat: Stewarding Technology for Communities. And I love it because my whole thing with ECFE is around building community and around the support feature. And anyway, so there are it's a kind of a step-by-step thing, but you get to choose kind of what you're designing and who you're designing for and what your learning agenda is. And so anyway, so when you ask for materials, this is it, and I will write that in the notes. If I did do just like a 5-minute walkthrough on what's in this book, would that be useful to you? Anyway, so speaking of usefulness, so so my 2 questions are this. One is, would you like to, I don't know where you are all in your school years and all of that, but do you want to meet again next Friday? We're going to meet again with the Wednesday group. So there's nothing saying we can't, but I suppose if this ends up being Anjali and I, then that probably tells me it's time to go. So, but do you want me to hold this space again for next Friday at 1 or noon? 1. I mean, it's 1 in the event. So let me see it, thumbs up, just so I have a general sense of interest. If you're not, so I just see 1. No. Who's that? Lorraine? No, you're done. Oh, you're good. Oh, okay. You're going, no, I'm out of here.
Just Wednesday. I'm just not going to do Friday.
Okay. All right. Oh, I see. Okay. And then my second question before we go, we talked about a whole lot of things. It was quite a really wonderful kind of multifaceted conversation. What was meaningful to you today? What will you take with you that was most meaningful as you move on in your in our emotional time?
I like the reminder of starting with the why. I like that. I think it just brings us back to the importance of it instead of just figuring it all out. We need to have that first.
Mhm. What inspired me today was the great ideas you guys have about, or the thoughts that came together about what ECFE's true core value is. I think those are really important. Advocacy, the parent-child relationship, modeling for the parent in person for their child. I thought that was very, very heartening, as well as I think would be a great tool for you guys to move forward with.
Yes. Nikki was raised about, I feel like I'm talking for you, Nikki. Like, here, little girl, you just stay right there and let me do the talking. No, Nikki has, because I was going to actually echo what Nikki said besides the advocacy was just about sort of bringing this group to some, empowering this group in some way, that just the collective power of your ideas, and if that flows into some sort of advocacy, that's great. But Nikki, do you want to go on with that?
I can add one more thing, and that is, Susan, actually, it's a personal thank you. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I think when all of us are speaking about not necessarily being drawn together or looking for the leadership, you have come into a situation that none of us even knew was on the horizon and have pulled us together in a way that we haven't felt. And we are seeking it and we are searching for it. And you have provided so much to us. I was actually coloring for a different reason today while I was in this meeting. But I will hold it up because this is what I was coloring on. And I think it's so important. And I don't know where do we go next year and how do we do this? Susan, are you retiring? And what is happening? And I think we have found an amazing opportunity here that you have provided. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. A, I'm not going anywhere. And B, it's easy, but it's really, like I'm just at this place in my life where I'm stopping doing things that don't bring me joy because I can, and holding on to the things that do. And so honestly, being able to hold space like this with you all is one of those really joyful things for me. And so why would I stop this? I mean, my only thing is I have to be careful that I talk too much. So, but I appreciate it. And as long as you all want to gather, if I can help to facilitate those gatherings, I just need you all to also give me a sense of direction and purpose and where this goes to make it most meaningful for you. So thank you.
I would just reiterate I want to thank you, Susan, and for everybody here for showing up in the discussion. My takeaways is what was just brought up, this holding this space to build relationships and connection. And I'm really curious about the digital habits and to remind core values are over and over again in terms of how I connect with whatever the toolboxes that we're using any given week.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, thank you, everyone. And then finally, that my little survey is out there. If you have any questions about it, especially like just why are you doing it and what what purpose does this serve, I'm always happy to share that. We have 52, I think, responses so far. My distribution list has been pretty much anybody who's shown up for these meetings, and then I posted on Friends of Family Education. And then the parenting educators and folks that I work with through Parentopia, that some of them are on this group, some are not. So again, please feel free to share that link if there's anybody you know who didn't get it, who would like to complete it. I don't have an agenda at all in terms of using it, except for it to be useful to you. And so I have a McNair Scholar. There's a program at the U called the McNair Scholarship for first generation students whose families have not attended college before. And so for students who are now in college, they can apply to this scholarship, and it basically pairs them with a mentor, and they do a research project. And so one of my former undergraduate students approached me to be her research mentor, and so she and I will be actually analyzing that qualitative data from your responses to the survey over the summer. And so it'll be a great learning opportunity for her. And I won't pass this off to anybody else in terms of like somebody else doing the analysis. It will be me. So if you have any desires, well, first of all, if you'd like to help, there's going to be so much to do. But, and I'm not kidding about that. I mean, qualitative work really does take a long time. So if you find yourself a little bored over the summer and you're looking for something to do, just let me know. But at the end of the summer, you know, we'll have enough results from it that I can share back. But again, that's as far as Susan's thinking at this point. Just that there will be results from the survey, but exactly how those will be shared back, I'm going to leave it to you all to let me know what is going to be most useful to you. Probably something with Menafee, because they had approached me this spring to do like a professional development thing about technology. And I think just with craziness, it didn't happen. And so, but they were asking me to do some regional workshops in the fall. So I imagine there'll be some, you know, of the results shared then, I mean, in that forum. But just let me know, you know, how you want those results shared back. And I will do my best to synthesize and make them, you know, I won't write a book, we'll put it that way. Although I'm sure there's a book worth of information. So anyway, so just wanted to throw that out there about the survey. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you've done it, this is for you. So please share it with others, and just, we'll see how it goes. So, and it's open until June 8th. So it'll be open for another week. All right, everyone. And with that, I will wish you all a good week, and see you next Friday. I'll put an event in the Facebook thing. So, okay.
Thank you very much. Good to see you all.
Thank you.